Okay.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Welcome to our TGM webinar, previewing several things with the TGM program, but primarily our current application period for the TGM grants. So again, welcome this morning. My name is Michael Rock. I'll kick us off and have some of our staff introduce themselves, present material, and then I'll also monitor the question and answer portion of today's webinar. So in terms of how things will work, we've got some prepared material that are kind of giving you a program overview, although I think many of you are pretty aware of TGM services or at least have dabbled in a little bit in the past, but we'll provide some information there. Many of you submitted some questions in advance of the webinar, and we'll try to cover some of that material as we go through with some of the prepared information, example for completing. So with that, I guess maybe the last thing, I'm getting an unstable network connection, so hopefully you can all still hear me. I would say if you have questions as you're going along, there should be a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to answer or put questions in there that we'll try to follow and answer as we can. And if we're not able to get to the chat that way, you can raise your hand. So we'll be sure to make sure we get as many of the questions answered as we can before we're done today. So Elizabeth, would you like to introduce yourself before we get started?
Yeah, Elizabeth Burdett. I am the program lead at the ODOT side of the program and do most of the work related to grants.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. And then I see Bill on. Bill, would you like to say hello?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Holmstrom. I'm work at the Department of Land Conservation and Development. As TGM is a joint program between ODOT and DLCD. I'm the agency's land use and transportation planning coordinator, so kind of the lead planner for TGM stuff at DLCD. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And Elliot, I don't know if you want to say hello as well, and if there's any other technology tips you want to give anyone, please do.
Hey there, I'm Elliot from DLCD. Sorry, I'm staying off camera. I recently was sick, so I'm sparing you all. Yeah, just here for technical support. If you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A down below, or you can raise your hand. I believe some of these settings change from meeting to meeting. So if something isn't there, just try to pop it in chat, and we'll try to do our best to answer it for you. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Elliot. Okay, with that, Elizabeth, I'll turn to you. Go ahead and get started. I'm also going to go off camera to save some bandwidth, but I'll be monitoring the Q&A and let you know if there's anything to come in that we need to address as we go.
Okay, great. Thanks, and apologies in advance, everybody. Zoom is not my usual platform, so we'll see how this goes. I'm going to share. Okay.
I can see your TGM application screen. So.
Great, fantastic. Thank you all for attending and for your advanced questions. These pictures that you're seeing here on the front are from our new flyer that describes the TGM planning grant program. There are flyers for all the other programs on our About Us section of the TGM webpage. So TGM, as Bill mentioned, is a joint program between ODOT and DLCD. It was formed in 1993 by the legislature. Since then, we've funded over 1,200 projects to assist local governments to plan for growth, to help implement the transportation planning rules, the Oregon Transportation Plan, and the statewide modal and topic plans at the local level. These are our 5 main objectives. There are sub-objectives under each of these. They all collectively, they speak to creating and maintaining communities where people want to live and work, and the ability to move around in those communities in between them. So there are 2 program components. one, the grants, which is primarily handled through ODOT, and community assistance, which is primarily handled through DLCD. This presentation will be mostly about the grants, but happy to answer any questions about community assistance at the end, or if during the presentation you hear something that makes you think about it. These are the key features of the plan again. So it's very similar to in the community assistance as well. Who can apply, which is basically most units of government that are located within the state. There's an annual cycle. Our projects are not particularly big, and that's because we have to spend that money within a certain amount of time to meet our federal requirements. There's also a local match. At any one time, there are 4 or 5 cycles going on. So that's why you see about 40 projects right now. And we would expect to award 10 to 15 in that September. So what are the kinds of projects that we award? We do what we call category 1, which are projects that are making a decision about transportation systems and services. Everybody's familiar with, for the most part, with TSPs, TSP updates, elements of TSPs. But we also do a fair number of other things, including transit development plans and TSP refinement. The second group are category 2. Those are where you're making a decision about land uses and the supportive transportation systems and services. These are often downtown plans or plans for areas that are poised for growth in the next few years. So before we get to this cycle, just a quick discussion of who applies for TGM grants and what they apply for. TGM has received 355 applications in the last 10 years. 3/4 of those are from cities, and 1/3 of all the applications are from Region 2, which makes sense since the cities are far and away there are more cities in Region 2 as well as the largest number of counties. During this 10-year time, TGM was awarded 140 projects, which is about 40% of the applications, which is why you may have applied in the past and not gotten an award. But I always encourage people to keep applying because if they still have that need, because many projects are selected on their decision. So what types of projects are most likely to receive funding? In general, we award projects at about the same percentage of the types of projects that we receive. TSPs and TSP updates are about 1/3. Another category 1 projects comprise a bit over 40%. Our target for land use projects, category 2, is 50%, but it is in general only about 20 to 25% of the projects. There is a significant difference between application and award for other transportation, which is kind of our catch-all category, and things such as tsunami evacuation, interchange area management plan, border plans, etc., fit into that group. For a variety of reasons, these applications have had a harder time demonstrating how they meet the criteria. So I encourage anyone with this kind of project to reach out to their TGM lead for advice. Are there any questions, Michael, before we move on to talking about what's going on in this particular site?
No questions. Yeah, I'm able to pause for just a second. Remind everybody there's the Q&A box down there if you want to add something. We'll track that.
Also,
Okay,
let me pop in. If for some reason you guys are not able to access that, go ahead and send me an email. It's Elliott, ELLIOTT .Eastman, EASTMAN @DLCD.Oregon.gov. And if you're having any issues, I can try to troubleshoot that.
Thank you, Elliot. So no open questions yet, Elizabeth. So why don't you keep going?
Okay, so this cycle, we are about 6 weeks from the application due date, which is July 31st at 11:59 p.m. We'll take the next 2 months to complete our scoring and do all the activities related to that. And we expect to announce our awards in mid to late September. So how do you apply? this year, last year there was an application packet and application instructions. We merged those into one document. They are on our webpage, the planning grants webpage, the online form, Cognito, which is a lot of ODOT uses, is linked from the packet. There are, of course, many requirements, but we do want to highlight the resolution of support or authorized letter, because it does often take a while to get on an agenda. But this is a requirement that must accompany the application. So there are the 5 main criteria they're weighting are very similar to what you've seen in recent years. However, we are asking for slightly different responses for all of these, except for number 4, which is community support. Again, as just like last year, we are asking bonus points for advancing housing production and accessibility. This is in line with the priorities of the legislature and the governor. So we did ask for advanced questions. And if one of these was your question and I don't answer it correctly, or I'm not really getting it, please feel free to put it in the chat or contact me later. So first group of questions is about specific types of projects. And these types of projects, these 3 projects, housing, safe routes to school, parking reform, these are right up TGM's alley. The key thing for all of these projects is that, there has to be a policy component to the project. So for safe routes to school and other projects like a TSP update, you can't just be updating the project list. You'll be needing to take a look at the plan as a whole. I should also note that parking reform is also a new program that TGM is doing. So you just need a little more surgical type project. I encourage you to reach out to the person at DLCD, which is Ryan Markford. So, of course, questions about money. And I'm not sure I'm answering the top question correctly because valuation isn't a term that we use too often. But it is, of course, okay if the consultant helps you with your project cost estimate. I should also note that TGM is going to prepare our own estimate for your project based on recent projects that we've been doing. So if you ask for 150 and we think that it's 180 and we award your project, we will allocate 180 for your project. Speaking of allocation, somebody asked about what is the regional allocation mentioned on page 2 of the application packet. And as you might imagine, based on population, there's more money allocated for projects in the Portland metro area than in Eastern Michigan. However, TGM does reserve funds to be able to award good projects in regions with more projects than funding and where we have staff capacity. So thinking back a few slides ago to who is applying, this is primarily used in regions 2 through 5. One question was, what does your authorized letter or resolution need to include? It doesn't have to be a lot. These are both quite short, but they clearly state what the application is going to be for and why that application is needed. I also encourage you, if you're not quite sure, there are a number of sample resolutions on our webpage for projects that we were awarded last year. So some questions about the award criteria. People are always wondering, how do I make a successful application? We reworked the application this year to ask more leading questions as opposed to just sort of a large narrative, to make it clear that what we're really interested in is your local story. So we're going to be asking specifically, what are the local issues and the local objectives? And how does it relate, to other planning efforts and projects? And what will be missed if the project is not funded soon? And how does the analysis and process relate to the objectives? And will that work support the eventual recommendations? So scores are really looking for how the various parts of the application work together. As noted here, there are often earlier worthy projects that we would like to fund, but judge that they can probably wait a year. So making a strong case in award criterion 3, timely and urgent, is really important if you want to be funded this year. So what are the most common mistakes? Well, reimbursement and match responses are by far the most common. I prepare an errata sheet every year. It's easily 75% corrections. So this year we added a very long discussion of this on page 12 of the application packet. And I'll discuss this as well when we get to the simple application. I also encourage you to talk to the region lead about this. Michael, do we have any questions before we move on to the?
There is one question, although it was ahead of the slides you just covered, so I really do think you cover it, but I do want to ask it and then maybe see if Bill has anything he would like to add as well. So it basically was, what is DLCD versus ODOT value within submitted applications? So I think, Elizabeth, you being with the ODOT part of the program, I think you've highlighted some things that jump out to you to be aware of. And I actually think your timely and urgent kind of tiebreaker comment is a really good one in terms of, there's a lot of demand out there. We really want to eventually help out every jurisdiction we can, but sometimes we have to take ones that are very timely for this given cycle, or it's just, the right fit, and hopefully we can get to others later. So I think that's part of the answer. I don't know if there's anything you'd want to add, and then maybe see if Bill has anything from the DLC perspective that they look at when they're reviewing applications.
Yeah, sure. So again, Bill Holmstrom, DLCD. I don't know that I necessarily have, I think every reviewer brings kind of their own perspective to it, depending on which agency they come from. I mean, we're all working from the same set of criteria, across that. But, I think for me, things that I think are particularly important that I take a look at are the approach, the proposed approach to the project, and making sure, particularly a transportation system plan, that you're not doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, that you're really tailored to what your jurisdiction needs. And that's important to me. I'm really making sure that you're looking at the TGM objectives and taking those to heart, and taking approach to the project that is meeting, some of the key TGM objectives. It's not just going to be business as usual. It's some of the values that our program has are reflected in the project that you're proposing to do. So those are some of the things that I'm looking at in particular, on top of everything else that Elizabeth talked about and all the other criteria. Those are some things I think I'll take a close eye at. But depending on the region in the state, it may be a different DLCD reviewer, maybe different ODOT reviewers. They're all going to take their own tack at it, and I can't tell you from year to year who that's each going to be in each region. So.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I guess maybe now, looking at the question again in terms of ODOT perspective versus DLC perspective, this is more of an administrative question. I'll try to have it pop back on camera. Much of the TGM money funding is federal transportation money, and there always needs to be a nexus back to transportation. So ODOT always has that lens and eye on things. We want to promote the transportation land use connection with this whole program as much as possible. But we will be making sure there is the nexus back to transportation, so it remains eligible for TGM funds and for our federal funds. So projects that really have that tie very strongly, I think, would score and do quite well from both agencies' perspective. It does look like there's a couple more questions that have popped in. So first one says, you mentioned examples of a resolution on the website. I am searching and can't find any of the prior applications. So Elizabeth, I think it'd be good to maybe direct people, or maybe when you're on the slides, we can show where to find that. Is there anything you want to say on that one now?
Yeah, so it would be under 2023 awards on the planning grants page. Should be the applications from last year. If they're not working, let me know. Reach out to me after the meeting, and I'll.
Okay, could you repeat that again
It
Where?
would be under 2023 awards on the planning grants page.
Got it. Okay, found it. Thank you. One more question right now. So what is the role of the project manager if the city is retaining a consultant? I mean, I assume like city project man. What's the role of the city project manager, or community project manager, as opposed to the ODOT or DLCD project manager? I assume, but we could probably talk about both roles, really.
Yeah. So typically, well, for almost all of our projects, there is a local project manager. In fact, there does have to be legally a local project manager. And then, but sometimes the work itself is managed more by somebody who is not a city employee. And that a lot of times, in fact, our example today will be where the COG plan is doing a lot of the day-to-day management for the project. A consultant themselves could, I guess the city or local government could cede, management of the project to a consultant. That would be unusual though, because they would not be able to count that as match. So it would be, I've never seen that really happen except in 1 or 2 cities.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. And there are a number of other questions that have just come in. Next one is, will this be available for download later for reference to all who are working on a project and may not have been able to attend today?
Yes, so the PowerPoint, the webinar recording, the PowerPoint, and the sample application that we're going to go through on the portal, those will all be posted on the website within a few days.
Great. And then I actually should have looked at this full list before I went to that question, because we have a few more that are around kind of city or community administration. So there's again a question about the Council of Government, IGA with the city, like how to manage that, grant administration, project management, assisting a small community. And then someone else with a very similar question, we'd like a consultant to create our application and then also retain them for the project. Is that allowed? So I think that's a unique wrinkle there. So first, maybe before we go to that one, anything you want to add around, working with the COG, or should we wait for the example if that's where we're going?
Well, I can just speak to, we don't do that as much as we used to. It used to be very common that TGM would do a project with a COG and a local government at the same time. So we would do a 2-party agreement. The city would be responsible for the match and the COG would be responsible for most of the work. We don't do that as much, but that is perfectly fine to do that. In that case, there's also the case of the example that we're going to be using, which is based on the city of Dayton's application and how that's working out. The city does have a planner assigned from the local COG, but our agreement is just with the city of Dayton, and they are using the money that they spend paying the COG as their match. So the COG isn't being paid by ODOT; it's being paid by the city. And either one of those is good. It really just depends on what works out for the local government.
And in that one, I mean, every situation is a little bit unique, and encourage you to reach out to us or reach out to your regional TGM contact and help work through some of that ahead of time if we need to. So we get it right. Okay, so the second question that I did preview, though, Elizabeth, was this person would like to consultant to help create our application and then also retain them for the project. Is that allowed?
So it's perfectly fine to have a consultant do your application. In fact, that's one of the questions we ask at the very end, which is, did a consultant prepare your application and did you pay them or not? because there are certain aspects related to procurement. So you could have a consultant, as we say, work on the project in essence as acting as the city. And that would be allowed for our projects. Again, that would not be eligible for match. If you are saying, if your question is, I would like to then hire the consultant to do the work of the project, then that they would have to compete just like everyone else for the project work and follow ODOT's procurement. In that case, it would be imperative that they were paid to prepare the application.
So yeah, a lot of nuances there. And again, encourage you, if you are going down that route, to reach out to us and in your region contact, because we would want to get that one right. I know we've stubbed our toe before on some of those connections.
Yeah, and when we can get to that portion of the application, we can talk about that again if people are still curious.
Okay. There's one more question in, and this might be one, feel free to defer if you're going to dig in more about match, because I know match is an area of a lot of confusion. It's just, what are the restrictions for match now versus the past? I don't know if there's dramatic differences, but there's a lot of nuance and confusion with match. So anything we want to say now, or should we wait for the example?
Match is very complicated for sure.
Yeah.
And so I would say that there are many ways to provide match, and in recent years, I would say it's maybe been 5 or 6 years, we've allowed for a broader range of match items, including the time for committee members and stuff. So what we call volunteer match. But 90% of our projects use in-kind match of the city staff as their primary match component. Because that's just the easiest for them to track the document.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll have a little bit more on match coming up, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I think we got all of them, although I'm going to go through and kind of say thank you in the chat so I can move them off the list, and if there's any I missed, we'll get to them here shortly. So Elizabeth, if you want to move on, I think we're ready.
Okay. So as I said, the sample this year is based on our most common form of application, TSP update in a smaller community. And it's one where the local government wants funds to hire a consultant to do the work, and the local government is not getting paid and it's providing in-kind match. So the sample is based on the City of Dayton's successful application from last year, with a few things borrowed from other cities and modified to fit our current questions. So I'm going to end my slideshow, and can everybody see? Oops. Let me share. Can you see
Sorry, I was over. We do have one other question that came in, Elizabeth, maybe while we're now I see your screen. So is TGM grant a 2-year process and available only on the biennium? So I think it is it's an annual cycle, an annual application period. The process that they'll be active longer than 1 year. That's why we have a lot of them going in different phases of project development and implementation and closeout and all those things at once. But the cycle itself is each year.
Okay, so this is the application portal. I have already preloaded my application in here and saved it so that we can go through it. Last year, our application was from the city of Planwell. This year, it is from the city, given that we're doing a TSP, it's from the city of Speedy. The city of Speedy is in Regional 2, but our contact person is the same as last year, which was Lanny Planderson. So she put in her name and title and contact. That's my email, so I can give examples. The question that we often have is, and I should say that I have created a Word document and copied all these things. It's really hard to do this, to type everything in. So who's the person empowered to sign the agreement? Where is the TGM, is the planner who can sign an agreement binding a city? So usually this is going to be the city manager, the mayor, county commission chair. So we just, if you know who that is, it's great for us to know that. And typically, if you get an award letter, that person will be copied so that they know that this is done. List of co-applicants. So this is, in this case, again, because I said this is a project with a COG, I've put Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, and that they are not providing match back. They're being reimbursed for their work. If it was a project, this project also happens in Yamhill County. We didn't list Yamhill County because we don't really expect Yamhill County doesn't have an active role in the management of the project. They are on committees and they will do things, same thing with the transit district, but they are not going to be party to the agreement. So upload our resolution. Here is resolution. I'm going to put it right here. And you can see that this is a resolution I borrowed from Dayton again. Pretty straightforward. It just tells us why they want the project and that they have authorized their city staff to apply. After that, project title, mentioned in the application packet, but we really prefer, if at all possible, that you not put the name of the city itself or the government in the project title. That has to do with the naming convention of the TGM and ODOT uses for agreements and contracts. So typically the project title is the name of the final document of the business. You can also upload a map when we're asking what's your project area. In this case, because it is just the city of Dayton, I just put in all lands within the city TGB. So either one is fine, or both. You can put them both in. But you don't have to include a map if it's something that can be explained just from a legal standpoint. Again, this is in region 2. Because it's a TSP update, it's a category 1 project. So summary description of the project. This is typically going to list in a pretty short amount, about 3 or 4 sentences, what the end result of the project is likely to be and describe what the transportation connection is. So in this case, we're updating an old TSP to get a new one that meets the needs of the city for the next planning period. And also to fulfill requirements and build state requirements, and to incorporate their own recent planning. So project cost table, this is where we're going to talk about the match. So what I'm showing here is the most common thing. The city needs a consultant, $205,000. In fact, that's in what the dollar amount is going to be on this state. And that there is no local reimbursement. In this case, the minimum match is $23,000. So I'm going to write that the city is going to provide $23,500 in match. This would be in-kind match. This would in this particular case, it would be the staff time for the city of Dayton. It would be the staff time for the COG, and it would be the staff time for the city engineer who is a private consultant. That is eligible for match. And of course, it needs staff, any volunteer time. Occasionally, a city is real flush and they don't want to track their time. And in that case, they're going to provide us with match instead. And instead of asking for the full amount, they're going to say, I'm going to give you some amount to apply to the project. So in this case, they're only asking for 185 because they're giving an additional 21,200 for a total of 206,200. That's probably our second most common type of match. The third least common is where we have a consultant who's just doing the technical work for a small portion of the project. And the city or the COG or someone like that is doing a big chunk. This is most common again with larger cities like the City of Portland project where they have lots of staff people, or for a project where a COG is going to do it. In that case, the match requirement is here, and that is, they're going to be doing that through their tracking of staff time and volunteer. Any questions on that?
None yet, but I'll give everybody a second
Okay.
to type. Okay. And no, none came in, Elizabeth, so we can always circle back to this if there's any later.
Yeah. And I just want to also note that where we call local reimbursement, in this case, that was funds for the COG, because we consider the COG to be a local government as well. Even, although it could also be for the city.
Okay, actually, it looks like we just got a question. Yeah, it's a good one. How are volunteers allocated dollar amounts for match? What is the criteria for those credits, i.e., who would get what amounts for the credits for dollars? Is that based on prevailing wage?
Yes, so we will provide, when the project is, if you're awarded a project and when it's executed, we will provide you the spreadsheet that lists the current average hourly wage in the county in which your project is going to occur. And you can use that rate to apply to volunteer hours. Volunteer hours are typically used for people who are serving on committees, the time they spend reviewing and commenting on the deliverables of the project, the time that they spend at meetings. And that can actually add up to quite a bit of time if you have a large committee. We can also, I should say, you can also include the hours and the actual rates of, if for instance in this project they could include hours from the city of from Yankton County, and that would not be at the average hourly rate. That would be at the actual rate of that staff person.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. So yeah, there is a lot of ways that you can calculate match. You can accrue match. I realize this is a webinar based on filling out your application, but if you're awarded, I encourage you to work with us and your grant manager from the agencies pretty closely on match. We can be capturing that from very early on and help to make sure you're accounting for staff dollars, volunteer hours, all of that, because we don't like to get in a situation where we get close to the end and we don't have what we need on match, and it gets messy. Nobody wants that. We don't want to run into that problem later. And I think there are a lot of ways that we can get there throughout the project. So keep in touch on match questions, and if awarded, definitely keep in touch on how that's being calculated.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about, I'm not sure if I should even apply because maybe I can't meet the match. Please reach out and we can talk to you about what the options are in detail for your specific situation.
Definitely. Okay, nothing else in the chat, so keep going.
So now we're going to really sort of enter what we call the project information, so we know what people are asking for. Now we're kind of getting into the actual answers. And I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint because this is very hard to read because it's a lot. All right, Are you seeing the slides again?
Yes, we're seeing the slides. I did have one other question
Oh,
that came in, Elizabeth, and maybe before you move on to this. I'm not sure if it's about match or generally about the application, but let me ask it now. So, are there examples available for previously awarded projects and the wording for current that would now meet requirements? So I guess maybe just point back to the examples again here.
yeah, so on our webpage are the 2023 projects that were awarded. There are also many older applications. And so if you're go and look at that and you think none of these really fit my particular project, and you want to see what other people did, you can reach out to me. I have access to 15 years worth of applications pretty easily. So we can find something for you.
All right. Now I don't see anything else. I have a question though. How many words are on this slide? Did we do a word count of this one?
Well, I did. Yeah.
It's a lot. All right, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is, and it's funny. This is the only response where I actually wrote anywhere near the dollar amount, and Bill could say, since you read so many of the applications, that less is more, because the people have a lot to read and to score. But this particular response has the most points because this is probably one of the biggest things that it's 40 points. So it's probably the biggest thing that we're looking at, which is what is the local problem? As I noted, we reworked the questions. Instead of having a big narrative, we now are asking you very specifically, what is your local issue? And then the second part of this will be, what are the objectives for the project? So this response, which, as Michael says, is a lot of words, response speaks to a lot about making quality connections in a town that has some growth opportunities, but also has some older facilities that need upgrading, and where speed and safety is an issue. And this is a scenario we see a lot in the TSP updates. And so it addresses the urban growth boundary area expansion that they have just recently done. It talks about street standards and wanting to make it easier for everybody to get around so that people don't have to drive everywhere. So they're really making the connection to reducing vehicle miles. We're also connecting to transit. Again, a greenhouse gas action, and providing connections for all citizens, regardless of their income and ability to get around, and supporting economic development. So the second half of the question then from criteria 1 is, what are your proposed projects and how are they going to relate to the TGM objectives? So here we're really talking about don't tell us what our objectives are, because we know what they are. Tell us what your objectives are and how they do it. So these again are from, for the most part, from the City of Dayton application and eventual contract. And it's provide the necessary planning. We spoke to that in the application in the first section. Do the multimodal concepts, again, connecting to the recent, speedy forward vision, and developing safe and inclusive multimodal facilities, work on standards, and support transit. And as I said, these, connections as defined by the city of Speedy are not just streets, they are transit and people walk. So the second last slide that's on the part of the application that's on slide here is timely and urgent. So why is it important to do the proposed project in this grant cycle? As I stated, this is really tends to be a really key thing for us. So there are, in this case, again, this is tying to the why now is tying to the objectives that they mentioned before. Growth opportunities, building on recent planning efforts and concerns about safety. And that is it for this thing. Now, look back.
Okay. Elizabeth, we have a couple questions. Trying to, I guess it's probably the right time to ask these. So,
Okay.
second one first here. Why is there a limit on number of characters per criteria, especially the work tasks? And I imagine that it's, if you have a pretty detailed statement of work, scope of work, you could not have enough room to put all that in there. But I know we've gone back, we've been back and forth about, do we need novels? Do we need statements? Maybe talk a little bit about how we've landed where we're at.
So our goal is really that people think through what they need to do the project, but that they not be burdened to write the statement of work in its totality in advance, which could be a bunch of wasted effort if they didn't get awarded. And also that makes it the playing field a little easier between cities with bigger staffs and cities with smaller amounts. But we have had people who have submitted separately a statement of work, a full statement of work, and if they're awarded that, we just start out using that right away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good reminder about sort of the leveling playing field. I know it's very important for advisory committee, and for a while it felt like some of the larger communities with a lot of staff or consultant help on the applications were doing better maybe than some of the smaller communities. And that you're right, we want everybody on the same playing field as well. It's an important addition. Okay, one more. How do we write the inclusion data and inclusiveness statement within a community? And I'm trying to remember like what would be happening at the application phase versus later. Anything jump out to you there?
Not really. Bill, maybe you can weigh in on that.
So just let me reread it here. How do we write the inclusion data and inclusiveness statement within a community? I'm not quite sure what that's asking specifically. We're asking about. I'm confused about that. What the question is.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. So if there's anything you can clarify in the chat, please do. It's anonymous. I'm not able to necessarily get back to somebody later. But yeah, I'm not sure what we need at the application phase versus, again, if you're awarded a project, then obviously you dive into a lot more detail about recognizing the planning for the full community and what that means for your area. And so that's a big part of an awarded project, maybe less so in the application phase, although maybe I'm missing something or not misremembering something that's in there.
Elizabeth, remind me, we do have a statement that they need to file with the application. Is that correct? About the community?
There's a racial and ethnic impact form where you do address what the impact is on protected communities. And we do ask in the project approach how your project will advance equity. So we leave it at a very general level at this stage. Once we get into, if you're awarded, we get into it. A big portion of our discussion is about how are we doing outreach to people, not just doing outreach, but also making sure that the positive and negative benefits impacts are being considered in the project decisions.
Yeah, and I'll say that as part of the work our agency is doing with some of the enhanced planning requirements in the metropolitan areas around the state, we're going to be coming out with more guidance about how local governments can address equity, underserved populations, and really tackling those. And so that those will be coming out more later this year. That's a bit more general, not necessarily specifically about TGM projects, but I think there could be applicable things. But looks like there's a follow-up here in the Q&A, Michael.
Yeah, it was specific around that racial and ethnic impact statement. Yeah, how do we clarify that we're including everyone? How do we document this? So, Elizabeth, are those statements in the examples, or do we take them out because of the information? They're in the examples.
Yeah, so the racial and ethnic impact form, I'll upload that and show you what we put in there.
Great. Okay. Good questions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've talked about why it's important to do this. Right now, the city is also going to say, hey, what are the local actions that are needed to move the proposed project forward? We really want to make sure that there isn't some other thing happening that's going to make it hard for this project to get going. What if the UGB expansion that the city references here hadn't already happened? What if it was underway? And so maybe our project could get going, but then we couldn't move forward because UGB expansion didn't happen. It didn't get all the approvals. So we kind of want to know about it. So in this case, the city is again referencing their speedy forward plan that they did the previous year and how that's setting the stage for the updated TSP. Also that they have done a housing needs analysis and a buildable land inventory. That would be key components that we might be needing to do our analysis for this project. So then how does it relate? Okay, so that's projects that have already happened that this project really needs to go forward. But there are other projects that it's going to be relating to. So what are other projects that are underway that this project will work with or that need to? And so in this case, we're talking about design standards. The city is updating some design standards for the land uses in downtown. So our street standards will also be, doing an interface with the land use signs. Okay. But other times it could be, hey, this is part of, the county is also updating their TSP. So we're going to be working with them to try and be consistent. Those are very common statements. So criteria 3, which is the project approach. There are only so many ways to do a TSP or really to do too many projects. So planning projects. So we're just putting in pretty standard things. What if we put in here that the project's going to get started and I put in how much, first task, how long it's going to take, what are going to be the key things that are happening in that task, meetings, they're going to figure out who, what are the community needs as far as who lives there, where do they work, how do they get around. Then setting the policy context. I've also included how much we expect that this particular task would be. In this case, it says $50,000 for the consultant. If the local were being paid or a COG were being paid, you might say $5,000 for the consultant and $10,000 for the local. In that case, we want to know which were the deliverables of the local government or COG and which were the deliverables of the consultant. After that, again, it's a pretty standard thing. We do community engagement. We look at the existing and future conditions and think about what do we need and how will we pay for it, prepare the draft document, and take it into adoption. As Bill mentioned, it's real important here to kind of tie back to what your issues are and objectives that are specific to your community. That could be kind of easy to do if you're doing a land use plan for your downtown. It's a little harder to do for a TSP, but it's really key to really be specific about what is needed for in this or county for that. Any questions on what we're looking for in project approach?
Looks like something just popped in there. Okay, if a project is awarded, is there built-in provisions for extension of projected time estimates in case, and when in the trenches we find they've underestimated time needed for various phases of the project?
Sure. So once the project gets going, once we're working with the local government, we'll be thinking about how long it really takes. And that's a function of what the process, primarily what is the process of the local government. It's also a function to some extent of, how much work the consultant has and how they can, leverage their time. So we'll make an estimate. Typically a TSP type project, most of our projects probably take about 18 months. TSPs right in the middle there. Some more complex projects or really large TSPs would be longer. The key thing, and we could do time extensions, no problem. The key thing is that we cannot go past our federal finance, the part where the federal highway will pay for that for the work that's being done, and that's about 4 years from the award. So if it's a project that's a 5-year project, TGM is not.
Okay, thanks. I
Okay.
don't see anything else yet.
Sounds good. So still within the project approach, we're talking about how is this project approach supporting investment decisions for safe systems, climate action, and equitable outcomes. As Bill mentioned, equitable outcomes and greenhouse gas reduction are both been key parts of TGM for a long time, and all three of these things are really part of the recent TPR amendments and the Oregon Investigations Plan that was adopted last year. So in this case, the city of Speedy is saying, hey, I'm going to be looking for enhanced pedestrian and bicycle safety. And earlier they had mentioned that there had been some speeding in school safety. So they're really putting safety forward and noting that Speedy, has a large Hispanic population. So making sure that they address those impacts is going to be crucial. If adoption is a requirement of an eligibility requirement for TGM, not that you have to adopt it, but that you at least have to try to adopt it, either in the project or in a larger project. So in this case, we have task 8, I think, is adoption. If this were potentially something that they intend to, some projects might just do a component and then they're going to adopt it in a larger project, then they would list that here. So project community support. Now this is only 5 points, so it's not a lot, but it is something that we do really like to see, that people are interested in having the project go forward, which of course isn't a guarantee, as we all know, of it then ultimately being excited about the recommendations, but we want to start out on a positive foot. So I've uploaded some letters of support. This is from City of St. Helens project. What we're looking here is kind of a range of letters. This one comes from Columbia Economic Team, then the county itself, some more local partners, and a wide variety. But one thing you'll notice is that these are not form letters. Each one of these letters is unique. That's something we really like to see, that they are addressing their particular interest in the project and not just saying, hey, we support the project in a very standard. And one thing we do note is that we do really appreciate if you merge all your letters together, because it takes quite a bit of time to merge them. For us, if we have to do that individually. The last big point here is project sponsor is ready and capable. One of the things, it's not a lot of points, but TGM and has money that we have to spend. And so knowing that if we award your project, that project can get going pretty quickly and spend money, and that we don't reject another project, that maybe, and your project doesn't go through. And we don't spend the money. And that's a loss both to you and to another community. So we do want to really make sure that people are ready. In this case, we're speaking about the city manager and who's going to be the local contact, and also about the COG planner and their experience. And who else can assist with the project. And one thing that we say here is that, teaching projects actually take quite a bit of staff time, which is why we rarely ever have anybody who doesn't make their match. So knowing, that the person that you assign to this is really has the ability to put on to that is important. The city of Speedy didn't have any projects within the last 10 years, but in our application from last year, the city had listed several projects, and what the ultimate outcome for those were, whether they've been adopted or in.
Elizabeth, before you move on more, one question in here about the letters. So who else could we consider requesting letters from?
We get letters from all kinds of people. We get letters from private citizens. We've had letters from federal agencies, from like Oregon senators, and from school kids. So it runs the gamut. Most common are for cities would be the county. If you're in Portland area, you might have a letter from Metro. So most typically it's from maybe from your whoever might be doing the modeling, if you're in a COG area that does that for you. So it's typically those kinds of people.
Thanks. Looks like another question just came in. Good one. Could ODOT reps for the area provide letters of support for a project that includes an ODOT interchange?
Well, that is uncommon for sure.
Yeah. So let me hold back on camera. It's a good question. I don't know that we see it often. To me personally, and Elizabeth, if you disagree, or Bill, please hop in. I think it's good to demonstrate that the ODOT reps are aware of what you're proposing, supportive of, in general, that, work is needed around the interchange, or we're going to coordinate, so we're not, doing something that's in conflict or anything like that. Somebody else wants an ODOT interchange too. I'm not sure it's guaranteeing you a new interchange, but I think it's important to demonstrate the coordination. I don't know if a letter of support is in the same way from like an ODOT rep, since we're helping select, the projects. It's not like, hey, we support this one and we don't support others. I don't think we're in that boat. I think it's more demonstrating coordination, that we're okay with the concept. We would work with you on the concept, that kind of thing. It's the right fit. That's how I would answer.
I think it's probably a really good, I'm not sure the letters, Michael said the letters is what we need, but I think it's a good idea for sure to let your ODOT representative, if you're proposing something like that, know that you're going to propose that, because we will be coordinating with other ODOT planners, other people at state parks, and all throughout ODOT and DLCD. And if your field rep knows that you're applying there and what behind you, they're going to be able to give us, they're not going to go, wow, I had no idea this was coming, and everybody's sort of a little flummoxed. So I would recommend, especially if it's something that's maybe a little more intensive, like I am, that you speak to your ODOT plan for sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't see any questions.
All right. So the last one is the city of Speedy is making a claim for the housing points. They are mentioning that, hey, doing the planning for this 100 acres of undeveloped land is really important to us so that we can get that land annexed and to support future housing production. In general, Bill's a skeptic, I would say, on the housing points. But this is not a bad case. I would say that, you can always put something here, but not too many projects get more than a few points on this. Although the person who asked earlier about working on some design, some code work for housing and parking, that would probably score very well. So housing, the racial ethnic impact form, I'm gonna upload my form here. Open that. And so this is one where they have said, yes, it could have a great impact on people in our community. They've listed which ones those are, and they don't expect to have a negative. They are saying, hey, we're a majority community, and we're going to be really talking about making street standards and working on improving our connections throughout the community so that people can get around. And this is actually straight out of an application last year from city board member. They were in this very situation. All right, so the last bit, again, anything is the eligibility criteria. They demonstrate a clear transportation benefit. Yes, I talked about in award criteria 1, what was the local issue and how was it related to transportation? This demonstrates adoption. That's in the project approach number 3. And demonstrates the support of local officials. That was the resolution or letter of support. So I am affirming that we've met that. In this case, the application was prepared by staff of the primary applicant or one of the involved jurisdictions. In this case, it would be the COG. But you could also, have picked, a couple people are asking for this, a compensated consultant. Let's say I put that, and then I would put who was the person who did that. So we don't put firm. Okay. Well, or uncompensated. And as I said, this is really important for us, especially if you are if that firm is interested in being participate in the project down the road. So, would you like to receive TGM news and updates? You can say no, there's no problem, or that you already get it, or that you want us to add to it. So I'm going to say yes. I do want to get it, and then maybe I'm not certain that I'm ready to finish. In that case, I'm going to hit save. If I am completely ready, we will sending me my link now to my new updated application. And if I'm ready to hit to be done, I will hit submit. This year we've added a part where in previous years you would submit your application, there was no way to change it if there was a problem, for instance, with reimbursement or match. So this year I will get all the applications and accept them first. And if there's a question that I have, you'll get a new link saying, I'll contact you, and you'll get a link saying, hey, you need to correct this. And so that way hopefully we can get away from the errata sheet that everybody forgets. So that's it for me on the application. I have a few final things on the process. So I'm happy to go through questions about the application responses.
Yeah. Okay, Elizabeth. I momentarily got kicked out and lost one question. I hope I didn't lose more than one. Let me see what's in here. So this one's specific, and then I'll get to the more general question that I saw pop in. So, how do we follow FEMA requirements along creek areas to replace or provide new housing that doesn't run afoul of the FEMA requirements? Or would communities that have poor sections of community in those areas. We need to look at obtaining more land for urban growth boundaries. So this is a pretty complicated housing question around actually the planning work versus the application. I don't know a lot about the FEMA requirements specifically. I don't know if either you or Bill have anything you want to add, but it does sound like the kind of thing that our plans would have to work through is how do we accommodate additional growth, additional housing needs, while balancing a lot of these regulations that are making it
Yeah, I
complicated.
think, Michael, I think generally, TGM projects aren't going to directly address the specific FEMA requirements. Local governments will need to go through a work program, and my understanding is that another part of DLCD is with our natural hazards folks are working with local governments to update local codes to be consistent with the requirements of the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, sorry, and to make sure that all their land use requirements are consistent with those, doing updates of the floodplain maps, all that sort of stuff, so that everyone's consistent. And then all the other work, including transportation and land use planning work from TGM that goes along with that would be consistent then. So nothing that we're doing, I think we want to be consistently would be specifically against anything that FEMA is doing. And when it comes to doing UGB expansion, I mean, that's a larger question, right? Of what our community looks like, what land's available, what needs are there out there, and doing that whole process to go through to figure out whether or not additional land is necessary. And if it is, then go through that process. So, but that's not something specifically through a TGM project would do. Oops.
The only thing I would add is that if you're doing a specific plan, then talking about what the land use, what the requirements are for that particular piece of property, whether it's a floodplain or maybe we know it's kind of wet over there, but let's sort of figure out just in a general sense where the wetlands are. That is something, because that will affect where we can put the development and the transportation infrastructure. We can look at that, but it is not primary focus for sure. It's just kind of high level. So we're making high level decisions for an area.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. The question that I lost when I disconnected briefly was it was general. It was, how does ODOT, DLCD, and TGM all tie together? So I think just a reminder overview. I mean, TGM is the program. And it's jointly administered by ODOT and DLCD. So, both agencies are contributing resources and staff to administer the joint TGM program because it ties land use and transportation planning together. And so there'll be parts of implementing TGM that you'll see ODOT lead. You'll see other parts that you're seeing DLCD lead. Primarily, the grant administration is more on the ODOT side of things. That's why you're hearing a little bit more from us here, but there will be other services that are on the DLCD side of TGM administration that you would be working with them more directly. But it's the two agencies jointly working together on the one program. Okay, I hope I didn't lose any other questions. I lost them all, but I hope if we have any unanswered ones. If you didn't get your question answered, I would we'll put them in the chat now. So I think it's another floodplain question here that just popped in. Older infrastructure, bridges and roadways in 100-year floodplain with those recent FEMA changes. How do we meet this in TGM updates? I think as Bill was saying, that is something we got to just deal with if you're awarded a TGM grant and planning project. That might be an issue that we've got to wrestle with in an awarded project. There's been changes in floodplain, mapping, FEMA requirements. What's that mean for community development? And TGM may be a way that we're funding some of that community planning work in some degrees, and it's just one of the inputs or challenges we got to wrestle with in that area. So, okay. I don't see anything else. Elizabeth, you want to keep going?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna show quickly what happens if you get an award. So, as I said, our awards are gonna go out, letters are gonna go out in mid to late September. At that point, you will be assigned, ODOT planner who will work with you to kind of flush out the project approach and the application. Or if you were one of those people who had an already detailed statement of work, take that and get going real quick. And then they'll enter, for most local governments, a consultant selection negotiation process. Because these are federal funds, ODOT has to have the contract. Or there are a few people who are certified local public agencies that have been received approval to manage and administer federal funds. In that case, those local governments will enter into an agreement with ODOT really quickly by the end of the year. And they will then lead the consultant selection and contracting, and ODOT will reimburse them for those costs. But our goal is that all projects should be underway by summer or fall of 2025. Although, we always encourage people to go faster. Again, just want to reiterate that these projects have to be done by, May of 2028. So it's important it seems like a lot of time until you're stuck in a big queue at procurement or Department of Justice is looking at your contract or even your own internal processes. So we do really encourage people to jump right on it. So who do you contact if you have questions specific to the project? Not so much project questions about process or what do I need to upload, that kind of stuff. You can contact me or Bill for those. But if you have a question about, hey, would you support a project for an IAMP in my region? You should really talk to the region leads. They're listed here. They're also on our website, a bunch of different places. They can really give you direction on those kinds of things. And of course, here's our ODOT map. And then the last thing I want to reiterate again is when our deadline is. It's 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, July 31st. The portal will turn off at that point, and we will not be accepting new applications. So it is really great if you get them in earlier, and that way we can, get you in the hopper and start get you logged in and get your materials together and get back to you if there are any questions. So that's it for me. And I'm going to end my slideshow.
Okay, going back on camera, hopefully don't get kicked out again. So thank you, Elizabeth. Great information, a lot in there. So again, this will be available afterwards to help with you all or others as they're filling out their applications. So last call for questions. We'll hang on another minute or two to see if there's any in there. I invite you to check out the website as well. It has a lot of the same or additional information like those application examples, which I know will be very handy. I think those will be one of the better resources for a lot of the questions that came in. Okay. No questions yet. Let's give it one more minute. Maybe as you're typing, thanks to Bill and Elliot as well for responding to some of the questions and helping organize this. All right, looks like we got, thank you. It's just a thank you. So that was good. Thanks, Walt. Anyone else? Okay. Well, everybody have a great rest of the week. Good luck with the applications, and please do reach out if you have further questions that we could help with, or keep in mind those region contacts as well who will be able to work through the specifics on your community project. All right, everybody.